If you're ready to take your destiny into your own hands, you've come to the right place. This is The Bulletproof Entrepreneur, featuring interviews with the most exciting and amazing entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Chi Odogu.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the show today. If you love what you hear on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur podcast at www.odogwu.com. And without further ado, on with the show. Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur podcast. I am so thrilled to have my very good friend, Super Joe Pardo, on the podcast today to tell us a little bit about his new book and his business. So his new book is titled Sales Won't Save Your Business. But before we get into all that, let me tell you a little bit about Joe. Joe is an award-winning podcaster. He's a speaker. He's the convener of the MAPCON podcasting conference in the Mid-Atlantic region in the United States. He's a writer. He's a consultant. He's worked for many years in his family's company, which is a trucking service out of Southern New Jersey. Or is it Northern New Jersey? Southern New Jersey. And guess what, guys? In as much as this guy went from warehouse employee to doing sales to doing IT, director of operations, he left $100 million family business because he wanted to start his own company and strike it out there and make it on his own, which is very commendable because he comes from a family of entrepreneurs, and we all know that once you have that in your DNA, no matter how great it is working for anybody, it's always even better when you try to go work for yourself. So he left his family business to start his company. As he started doing that, because Joe has spent his life in the Disney family, I met him as a Disney head. His first podcast was a Disney podcast. He did that. He got to know a lot of people, and he transitioned his podcast from being focused on, it was called the Dreamers Podcast. It transitioned into the business podcast because he has so much skills in business, and he's been helping a lot of clients around the US and around the world. So he's just here to tell us a little bit more about his journey, his experiences, his new book titled Sales Won't Save Your Business. He has like 3 other books. His first book was listed as one of the best books to read in 2016, I believe, 31 Principles. And yeah, he's just an awesome all-around guy. That's why they call him Super Joe. So I'm pleased to have Super Joe on the podcast today to tell us a little bit about himself, his business, his experiences, and of course, his little tips and strategies to help you build a better business. So with that said, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Super Chi. How are you doing tonight?
Great, man. Nice and chilly day in Toronto, but not too bad. What about you?
It's been a dreary day here in South Jersey, but it's exciting because we were actually talking right now on the eve of the launch of my book. So I am both nervous, anxious, pumped. It's a mix of emotions running through my veins right now as I get ready to launch this book onto the world and hopefully help a lot of people.
Yeah, and I can only imagine because this is your first business book. The other books were not necessarily business; they were more personal development and nonfiction, I believe. Fiction,
yes.
Yeah.
No, not nonfiction. They were nonfiction. They were self-development books. Mm-hmm. The first one was noted as a lifestyle and business book because both the concepts and principles in there, you could utilize them in either way. Yeah. So it's really like this is the first professional book, right? Mm-hmm. The other ones were my artistic outlet, and actually I've considered that maybe doing on my next book, on the way to doing my next professional book, maybe doing this book where I take all 3 of my first self-development books and I'm combining them into one book, and maybe adding it into it so that it's a I think I have a name for it, but I don't want to leash it out into the world yet. But I'm thinking it might be like a leadership book. So a lot of self-development in that, but really focused on that leadership aspect of it. So we'll see. Yeah,
that's a very critical aspect of business. But before we get into all that, tell us a little bit about your background, Joe. How did you become Super Joe?
Man. Well, that started back in 2006. One of my very dear friends and like a brother to me, Matt, he was working at my family's business, and I think at the time I was feeling kind of down about myself about something that was going on or something like that, and I was, for some reason, I came back to my desk. I think I might have went on a vacation or something, and he plastered this picture that he drew of not a stick figure, but like an animated cartoon, really crude, kind of crude, picture of Super Joe. And, at the time I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Like, I really appreciate that. And I went into my drawer, and then eventually I took it out, and I don't think, I think I have it somewhere in one of my stacks of paper, but I have a picture of it that I happen to have on like an iPhone that I found. So if you go to my website, you go to the My Story button at the top, you can actually see and scroll down, you'll see the actual picture that was drawn. So it wasn't a title I gave myself, but it's a title that started to take hold back in like 2015, about a year after starting the podcast, the Dreamers podcast and all. And then by 2016, I was like, 2017, I decided that I was going to finally accept the moniker myself and just roll with it. And that's where it's like the business podcast featuring Super Joe Pardo. And the reason is because my mission, it's not because I'm so awesome. It's because my mission is to help bring the super out of each and every single person I meet. I really want them to feel life to the point where this isn't just about like, man, life, I got to go jump out of a plane. It's life. Like, I got to do what I can do and the best that I can right here, right now, because I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Yeah. So I want people to feel that for themselves and apply it. It's not, things aren't going to be perfect. Like, everything I've done has not turned out perfect. Yeah. It's turned out very well, but not perfect. And to that said, being appreciative of what you can bring to the table, as I've had to find for myself, that it can be a tough thing to do, but I think it's worth a shot, and that's what my mission is, to again pull that super out of each and every single person, just like you, Super Chi.
Great. So, why did you decide to transition out of your company's $100 million business? At that point, you had risen to director of operations. Things were going well. It's a family business, so hey, you're in line to take over the family business, so to speak. But what was that driving force that said, hey man, I need to go explore the world on my own and kind of carve out my own slice of the American dream and my own piece of the entrepreneurial goal?
So it's a dream that started for me years in the making. When I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a child psychologist. So much so that I cried on my grandparents' floor because I was like, oh, I'm the only boy. I'm expected to take over the business, blah, 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 blah. But I wanted to be a child psychologist to help other kids going through divorce. To me, that was a thing that, like, for some reason was a thing that was inside of me. And so really it started then. When I was about 10 years old, I found DJing, and you can see behind me, I got my turntables and, of course, records all around me, because I love music, and that helped spark that idea, like, maybe I could do something else at some point. I fell into the valley of working for the family business, and by the time I was 17, I started DJing and was doing gigs every weekend, and it was fun, and I made some money, and whatever, but it wasn't, to me, it wasn't about like doing the parties and things so much as it was like about the art, right? Like, that's why I'm about. So it wasn't until 2014. So when I was like 17, it was like 2004, right? So 10 years later, I come up with the Adventuratorium album, and I really fall in love with this process of doing something that's like super creative. I'm doing it on my own. I'm doing it for a good cause. We're raising money for charity, all of that. And that really sparked and sped up the process of me saying, you know what, I think I want out. With that said, it took 4 years before I told my dad that I wanted to leave, right? So I told him in the summer of 2013, I started going back to school because I don't have a degree or anything like that, because I need to figure out, like, what is it that I want to do? So that was in summer 2013. I was supposed to stick around until January of 2014. I ended up sticking around until April of 2014. April 2nd was my last day. April 14th, that album that I mentioned came out. So I started working on that in the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, and then that album came out. So, but like I said, that album really kind of helped inspire me because the album is about the movie Up, Pixar's movie Up. So it's all about journey and going on an adventure, and it just like was getting me all pumped up about this idea that like, you know, I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to make this work. Maybe this album will be that carrier. And no, DJing hasn't been the thing that's like carried me there. But at the same time, it actually was a critically acclaimed album from some very famous DJs in the world. It just wasn't like a mass selling product or anything like that, where I'd be like, oh man, now like I'm a multi-million-dollar DJ. Like, you know, it's like $20,000 for me to get out of bed to even come to your event. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, you know, you have to, for me, it was like, that was the catalyst. So how I got into podcasting from that though, was I left the company. I started doing podcast interviews to promote the album. Okay. And next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Disney World with a friend of mine, and he's like, "Oh, have you heard about this show? It's all about like entrepreneurs," and he's just interviewing people. And I'm like, "Oh, wait, what?" Like, to me, it was always like, "Oh, Disney are just roundtable, shows," and I'm just getting in as a guest. I was like, "Well, I know a lot of people live their dreams. I could do that." And then when the plane landed, I registered the domain name, the Twitter handle, Facebook page, all before we got to the rental car. And then 2 weeks later, I had a show. So yeah, we're off and running, and here we are. You know, 4 years, almost 4 years later. It'll be 4 years in May 20th. So, it's been an incredible journey, and I will say this as one last thing about that journey. Throughout that process of from then till now. A lot of people be like, "Oh, Joe, that's awesome! Like you're doing that thing, but like, how are you making any money at it?" And I used to say, "Hey, if I was in school, the first question you wouldn't ask me is how much money have I made?" Yeah. And here we are, 4 years later, and I'm about to graduate. So, being on top of that mountain, though, I would say, in my family's business, you never see how far you are up on that mountain until you get off and you're like, oh. Damn, like that's really we were really flying high there, and I don't know if I'll ever be on that type of level again, and that's, to me, that's okay. Like I don't know, I'm not motivated by money as much as I'm motivated by product and by experiences and helping people. So it's whatever, as long as my needs are met, I'm cool.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed is that you were doing podcast interviews to promote that album, and looking you up, I didn't find a lot of those podcasts from way back in the day. I see more of your recent interviews, more of your interviews produced, because I say this to say that in 4 years, you've consistently produced content after content, of week in, week out. Every Tuesday at 8 a.m., you're always releasing a new episode of your podcast, So the longevity you've shown in this industry is like one that's very admirable, because a lot of people try, they start, podcasting is difficult, as much as people think, oh, it's just getting somebody to come and speak. You have to research the person, you have to go back and edit, you have to promote. There's a lot of work that goes into it that a lot of people get tired of, especially when you're creeping up to the first 30 or the first 100. That's when a lot of podcasts die and fade, because it's like the stamina just isn't there. But you've produced over 300 thus far. So what kept you going forward producing content week in, week out?
I'm not gonna lie. There was times where I'm like, this kind of sucks because I'm not getting the results out of it that I want. And there was times where it was kind of just on autopilot. Okay, I'm releasing every Tuesday, blah blah blah. That's awesome. And then there was times where I had to change it up to fall back in love with it, right? So if you go back to like when Ava was just born, so about 2 years ago in the show, my boy Matt, who drew the Super Joe picture, he would come over every Monday and we would sit down and we would just talk about business topics, right? News topics, dream related topics, self-development topics. Like he reads a lot of like those types of self-development books. I don't read books. You know, we were able to vibe off of that kind of stuff. And then we would do these pre-shows for the show, and I fell in love with that idea. You know, and it took my episodes. I mean, if you go back, like some of those episodes are like almost 2 hours long. And it helped me develop
your voice
further on the mic, right? Because before that, it's like, oh, I'm interviewing people, but I'm not really talking. I'm trying to highlight the guest and trying to do all that. And for me, it was like, okay, this is my outlet. This is where I can develop not just my voice, but develop my relationship with my audience better, so they get to know more about me. So I'm not trying to interject myself so much or inject myself as so much into my guest interviews. So I needed like a balance. And it was helpful. We didn't get to do it forever. We only did it for maybe a couple of months, but you know, for me, like I learned a lot there, and then I took that to the next level with doing video last year. Doing I did like 100 vlog, business lesson vlogs, I called them, because it was business lessons in like 2-3 minutes, but I did them in like a vlog format, which is different. And I don't know if it really hit the target market I was trying to go after, but I enjoyed doing them, and that's to me like that was what really mattered the most at the time. And now here we are, where I'm actually again changing up my show, not just with the name difference, because that was really the start of it. Was like, hey, I'm changing the name, to now I'm changing into a couple different series to enable myself to shine through even more.
And so talking about the change, first of all, you ran the podcast for 4 years. You know, talking about topics that interested you, sometimes interviewing people. You know, I mentioned earlier, you know, podcasting is a little challenging and difficult. Now you switched from all that, change to a business podcast. Now you even change that further and say, hey guys, you know what? I have a lot of responsibility. I'm trying to raise a family, trying to grow a business. You know, I have so much worth of experience from my work with my family business, which is a $100 million company. I want to leverage this to get more clients so I can help them become better business people and help them drive better businesses. So you change the podcast and you say, hey, you know what? If I'm going to interview experts, they're going to have to pay to come on the show because I need to monetize and leverage my time. You know, which is a little radical, because in the podcasting world, we know that the main way a lot of podcasters make money is through sponsorship, and the next way is through you get money because of your podcast, not necessarily from your podcast. And a lot of people that are making the big money in the podcasting game are people that had big names to start with. You're talking about Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, you know, John Lee Dumas, that's just a content machine right out of the gate.
Yeah, it was.
So changing to a pay-to interview, what led you to that model, and what do you think is going to be the result of that?
So here's the thing. So back in like last year around probably like October, I started get like, well, actually no, I had already been getting a lot of guests sent to my email, right? People pitching me, and most of them, like I'm gonna say like 90% of them were coming from PR agencies. I had some people that just reached out, and those people were really cool, and even the PR agency people were really cool, and I made some great friendships from those. But you know, I started to think about it, and I'm like, wow, like I have something that's like legit getting 30 to 50 people a month, you know, in my inbox, and I'm only doing one episode a week. I don't plan on doing more than that because time, right? Like I've already cut as many corners as I'm willing to cut with the show. I don't even edit at this point, and it's no secret. Like if somebody curses on my show or something, I go back and I mark that time, and then I go work backwards from those marks to cut it out. But so like I've really cut down as much as I possibly can in the time department, and so I started to think, like, you know, these people, these PR agencies, they're getting paid to reach out to me. They're utilizing my platform. They're utilizing my hosting. They're utilizing, you know, to advertise their stuff, right? They're effectively businesses trying to advertise. So it's like, okay, well, if they're a business They're coming on a show for business. They're coming on a show to add expertise and add value, but at the same time, like really to promote their thing. Yeah. Maybe we should be charging for this, and maybe it's not right for everyone. I'm not trying to say, oh, everybody in the podcasting needs to be charging. Yeah. Because I don't necessarily think that. I think it's up to you to decide what works for your platform. Yeah. And of course, it's all about what you can get, right? Like, hey, some people can get $5,000, out of the gate per episode. Like, maybe you can. I don't know. But so for me, I'm like, I pitched this idea to a few of friends of mine, and they're like, well, those PR agencies could just stop sending you guests. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I guess. I mean, I don't know. At the time, I was writing my book, right? So that was my primary focus. So I wasn't really like focused on like how can I make this work? How can I make this a win-win situation for everybody? Yeah. Because I didn't expect the PR agencies to come and like pay me necessarily. It's the business. They're the business that's trying to promote. So like they. At the end of the day, they can write this stuff off. It's a marketing expense, right? Yeah. It's a business. This isn't the feel-good self-development thing. Yeah. Like, yeah, that's awesome. But like, at the end of the day, it's all about business. So a couple months went by, and after the book was like pretty much wrapped up and ready to go for launch, I started thinking like, I started counting all the reasons that I have to charge for my platform. But, look, I don't have the hundreds of thousands and millions of downloads and all that stuff a week or a month or whatever, but I have an audience that is a significant to me. It's a significant audience. It's significant to these PR agencies that want to get their clients on my show enough to keep sending me these guests and to feel the value and they're getting paid for it. Yeah. So why am I not getting paid for it? So my goal at that point was like, okay, well, what if I look at it differently? What if I charge as a sponsorship fee, right? Like you come on the show, you're charging as a sponsorship fee. We disclose that in the show, right? Like the show's not changing. I'm not vetting my guests still, right? Like if I don't feel like they're a great fit, I'm going to say no. Yeah. You go to my website, there's nothing about be a guest here, pay me. Like this isn't, one of the people that saw this article, this open letter that I wrote about this was like, oh, well, that's a weird business model. I don't think that's going to work for a business model. Well, hold up a second. This isn't really a business model. This is you want access to the show. The show's been around for almost 4 years. It's going to be around it's not going anywhere. Yeah. I've been blogging since 1996 when I was like 10 years old. Like I'm not going anywhere, right? At the core, at the base, the episodes always are getting more downloads. If you actually look at my newest episodes versus like my oldest episodes, my newest episodes don't get as many downloads as my old episodes until it's crazy. Like I'll get, a couple thousand downloads in a month, but my newest episodes will only have like 200 downloads. And that sucks that's why I can't do the sponsorship model because like they want 1,000 downloads at least to get a whole $20. Yeah. So it's like, okay, well that doesn't make any sense. But you look at like as the episodes get older, they continue to pile on the downloads. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, so here's how I can do this. Because I don't know if anyone's going to take me up on this. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. I think that they will. I think I made a compelling argument in my open letter. I think I made a compelling argument on my submission form, and I think it's worth it. So I set up these packages. There's 6 packages going from $300 all the way to $3,000. The higher end packages include paid Facebook ads in the package. So I'm putting my marketing skills to the test to promote their business. Plus it's my word at that point too. But so I was like, you know what? I'm going to change my show. And the reason I'm going to change my show isn't because this is my new business model where I'm just going to charge people to be on my show and that's how we're going to make it. And I'm not putting out an episode unless that happens. I created 3 other series to go along with the interviews. First is the interview episodes. The second is the Q&A episodes where I answer questions and answers. I think I haven't done one of those yet. I think I'm going to do them on Facebook Live. So I'll have a handful of questions ahead of time, but I can get some feedback that way. And then I'll also have the business lesson episodes where I just talk about one business lesson for that episode. Sometimes it'll be 5 minutes, sometimes it'll be 15 minutes, 20 minutes. However long it needs to be. And then I'll also have the business owner anonymous episode where I have a business owner on the episode, but they're anonymous. They don't give their name, they don't give their business, they don't give where they're from. So I can strip away the ego and really sit down in basically a consulting session and help them. Yeah. Right. So now all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I have this 4 sets of series for my show. I don't have to just be like, okay, what's the next interview? What's the next interview? I can record an episode tonight at my own time, because there's also something to be said for the amount of time it takes to schedule something, right? Like, I mean, look, you and I had to reschedule a couple of times here to get this to happen. Yeah. Scheduling is kind of a pain, and but it's something I want to do. And to go to the fact of the whole business model, right? So it's like, as you said, I want my skills set to be shown because I have a consulting business, 234 Solutions. By me interviewing other people, that's not like, I'm not trying to have people hire me because I'm Steve Harvey or I'm Ellen, right? Like if people think I'm a great host, that's awesome. I really appreciate that. If somebody wants to send me a big sack of money to go be a game show host or a host or something, talk show host, great. Please do that. I will gladly accept that and be grateful every step of the way. But that's not where my business is, right? My business is in consulting to help other business owners get to that next level. And that's why I need the show to work for me and not just be like, oh, great, I have all these interviews. I have these connections. I have friends all over the world like yourself. That's awesome. I love it. I'm grateful for the fact that I took the time to do that and build that network out. But it's not paying the bills. Yeah. True. Right? Yeah. Like and it's that's not what that's not what about charging people to sponsor an episode's about, right? Because at the end of the day, if I did 13 episodes, 13 interviews a year, right? If I did all 4 each week, like 1 a month, blah blah blah, 13 episodes or 12 episodes a year at $300 a piece is not going to pay a whole heck of a lot. I will cover my electric bill for the year. Yeah. Woohoo! That's awesome. I'm appreciative, but let's face it, that's not, it's not. Heck, the hosting alone, I'm paying like $20 a month just in hosting for my website and my podcast. So that's something.
Yeah, because like you said, podcasters have expenses. The PR companies, if you look at it, what they simply do is, get a list of great podcasters, great shows, well downloaded, send an email, just make it easier for discovery. So they send an email, you get to read the bio, and you say, oh, okay, you check them out on the internet. Yes, this guy will probably work for the show. That's basically it. And it's that one email, which is free, is monetized. Whereas you, as the host, you have so much more expenses. You have the time invested in creating the content, editing the content, hosting the content, promoting the content, because a lot of the times guests come on the show. When you release the episode, you send it out to them. They may remember to tweet it out, which I think a lot of guests are getting better at because they're getting coached. That podcasters don't like when, hey, it's your episode. It's not necessarily my episode. It's showcasing you. You should at least be a little bit active. But many guests still don't, actively promote their episodes. So monetization is the only way, because it's like, look at another way to look at it is Facebook is free for everyone, but you still have to pay to advertise there if you want to let everybody see it. And our conduit or our platforms as podcasters is another way for people to consume whatever you're selling, whatever you're trying to get out there in the world, without being pushy. Because once you listen to someone for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 1 hour, you get a deeper relationship with them, and then it's, of course, that relationship has to build up through some follow-up systems which the author or the speaker would have created in the back end. So I love your model. I'm just trying to say that there's no argument. I saw when you did the post on the internet, I read through it. I was like, this is actually a very good idea. I think I'll probably incorporate some of this, because don't get me wrong, we're all business people. We all need to pay our bills. and we all have commitments and expenses. And hey, if it's even possible to say, because when I thought about your model, I was like, okay, that might not work for everybody or all the PR agencies. But what if each PR agency buys like a block of time from Joe, a block of time from me, a block of time from everybody, so they know that, okay, they have a pipeline of people, whatever money they're making, they split it and they say, hey, we'll take a little bit less profit, but at least we have
value add, right, to the client. The only two things I want to add to that is coaching, right? So some of these PR, and I can't speak for all of them, but at least a couple of the ones that I've worked with, they do coaching with their clients to coach whether it's to make sure that they get a better website, landing page, how to answer questions, how to talk on the mic, how to be interesting, they do some of them do help that in that way. And the other thing I want to say is when you look at it from a perspective of like, okay, so it's $300 to sponsor an episode. You could just go build your own platform. Yeah. And it's also not to say that I wouldn't have people like Yushi on my show and not charge, and here's why, right? Because I know that you know the value of the platform because and the relationship of I know that you're going to share it out, and we have a relationship outside of that. So it's not just about money, it's about having that value and of that value exchange, recognizing the value. Exactly. So it's like, okay, so the value of a stranger coming on my show that I haven't met yet, and hopefully we hit it off. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know. Versus having a friend on, like there's that give and take, right? But if they only bring they're bringing value, but it's only one episode, so like I got to put in the hours. I mean, still even not editing the episode still takes between 3 to 4 hours to do an episode. Yes. Like I don't even edit the thing. I used to spend whatever the time was. It would take double, and I was using like 2 to 3 times the X when you're listening back. So it's like so if you're listening at like 2X right there, that probably sounded even faster. But my point being is they have the opportunity to go build their own platform, and I promise you, and I promise them that it's not going to be as cheap, and it's going to be a lot harder for them to keep it up and keep doing it week after week after week. And that's and you should go read the article if you're interested in what I had to say about it. For the most part, I got positive feedback. I got very few people that were like, "Oh, this won't work," or I've never heard of you, so I don't see how this could. Like, that's fine. That's okay. Like, don't be a guest on my show. Like, my show is going to continue regardless. It's okay. But I would love to have people on. I'd love to have people that support. You're supporting the platform. You're supporting me. You're supporting your episode, right? Like, you're supporting keeping it online. I can't tell you. You mentioned it about my DJ album. If you go to my press page and scroll all the way to the bottom, there's like 8 or 10 interviews or whatever from back then, from 2014. But a lot of the interviews that I've done over the last 3.5 years aren't online anymore. Like, so it's like, if you're only worried about the next like 4 weeks or 6 weeks of like when it comes out, like how many downloads it's going to get, to me, that's the wrong way of looking at it, because you're supporting it existing for a long time. Yeah. Great. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we've really done justice to this part of the discussion. So let's transition into your new book, Sales Won't Save Your Business. So what was the genesis of that, and what were some of the lessons you put into the book before I pick a little bit from my notes here?
So the book took like over 2 years to put together. Every person that I went to and was like, they're like, oh yeah, your books, your 31 life-changing concepts. I have it like back here. Your 31 life-changing concepts book, that's awesome, it's great. Like, but then I would tell them like the name of this book, and they'd be like, okay, I want that book. When is that book going to go? And I'm like, well, I'm working on it. And what ended up happening was Ava came along, slowed that process down. So it's probably actually been closer to 3 years that the book was really like I got to go back and look at my Evernote, because I had notes that I'm not sure when those started, but so it was probably between 2 and 3 years ago. I wanted to do it, but at the same time, I really wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to, and I don't know that it's perfect now. Like, I'm not trying to say it is, but I wanted it to feel encompass so many things that I experienced in my family's business, things I've experienced in life, and blend all that together to make this book that originally, and here's a marketing lesson for anyone who's listening. Originally it was meant for business owners, right? I'm building this book for business owners so they can get through some of the things that like we've had to deal with it at that level of success. I use the word success loosely because success is in the mind of the person, and the perspective is a big part of that. So, I was like, I just fought with it a lot, and I started to build the outline, and it took a long time to really like get through it and put it together. And then what really started up the gears to move faster was my wife and I got pregnant again with our second child, who we just had a month ago, almost today.
Congrats.
Thank you. So we got a girl and a boy.
Yeah.
So nailed it. But it was like, I was like, crap, I gotta like get this book done. Like this is something that's gotta be done. Now, in the time in which I thought that I was doing, or I was making that happen, I was doing those daily business lesson blogs. So I lost 3 months there because I was spending a lot of time doing that and keeping the podcast running, and then MAPCON was starting to get closer, right? Because that's in September. Yeah. So you go back 9 months from February, and I don't know what time that frame that was, like over the summer, right? And I was spending money on Facebook ads, and really what I should have been spending time on was getting this book done. And the marketing lesson that I alluded to earlier is that originally this book was for business owners. It really isn't for business owners. It's really, and I only had to make a couple of changes to make this book work. It's not for business owners. It's for business owners. It's for entrepreneurs. It's for managers. It's for salespeople and aspiring leaders, all the same. And from a marketing standpoint, it only took flipping a couple of words over and changing a few things to make it so it's like, oh, this would apply to anyone, not just business owners. Even though before it was like business owner, like in the book, you just like go down the line. And now it's designed for people that want more out of their life, want more out of their relationships, and want to build a better relationship with their business, with their team, their offer, and their process, and themselves. Because the first chapter is about empowering yourself first.
Yeah. Like learning how to get the right amount of sleep, learning listening skills so that you can be able to understand where the other person is coming from when you're communicating. I mean, I love the whole premise of the book. I read it twice already. So let's just pick out one or two things out of it. And I'm looking at the book right now on my other screen. So like you said, it's broken into 3 parts, which is the top process, team, offer, and then process. So talking about the team, I think the biggest thing I got from it is your pin. And I know you use the pin based on the Disney pins that you guys collected. Is that where that comes from? No, it doesn't.
But that would be a great story. I wish I could say I was that smart to use that. They are it's a roadmap, right? The book is a roadmap. So the idea is that they're pins on a map, and even the stone on the front, is like a stone for like a directional stone, right? And that's.
Okay, I thought it was one of those collectible pins that you would just cross-reference to Disney. So one of the things I got was in chapter 3 you were talking about how do you empower your team, and I think that's very crucial in any organization, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a corporation. The problem still comes down to letting your best people do the work and not micromanaging them. So in your experience running a $100 million company, what did you find were some of the best ways to empower your team?
Well, empowering them through the process, allowing them to be a part of the process, allowing them to have a deeper understanding than just being like, well, you're doing this because I said so. Those types of things can make all the world a difference when it comes to, is your team going to be like live and die by you, right? And live and die by what you need to accomplish. Like, so in the book I talk about the inventory debacle that we had, and there's a handful of people in there that really I don't think even at the time I realized how powerful what I was saying to them was. Like, I assume it was, or they were just like blindly following me. I don't know, but at the time, they really bought into what I was telling them and showing them that, like, hey, look, if we do this, 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 and this is going to solve our problem, and it's going to be a lot of work, and it was a lot of work, and it also, that during that time was like 2000. I want to say like 2012-ish, 2011-ish, that like I started to get burnt out from that that actually started like speeding up the process of me thinking about not being there anymore. Which sucks because it's like I did this to help do this great thing with all these people, and we did a great thing, but at the same time, like, it burned the heck out of me in the process. So I think also empowering your team to be leaders, right? To make decisions. They're not going to make the right decision every time. Believe me, I know. I have a dad that every time, if he gave me 5 decisions to make, I would make 4 out of the 5, or 5 out of the 5 a lot of times wrong. It would just be like, oh, I would think that he would want this. The thing is, and there's a great quote by Steve Jobs. Not like, I'm not big into quoting people, but like, one of the ones that people don't really talk about is the ones like he was talking about in reference to Walt Disney, and it's like everyone stops and asks like, well, what would Walt do? And it's like, no, don't ask what would Steve do. Do what's right. Figure out what's right. It's a science project. Do experiments and get it wrong and start over but make an educated decision. And to me, that was something that was difficult. Like when my grandfather passed away, and at first when he stepped away from the business for health reasons, but then when he passed away, it's like, it left a giant void in the company and in my family and in definitely in myself. And he, to always think like, oh, well, what would Joe do? My grandfather is like, no, that's not what we should be doing. We should be doing like what's right, because that's what he would be doing. Yeah. Right. So empowering people to try to make those right decisions and then living with them, right, and not demeaning people. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people demean other people. Or I was at Wendy's just the other day, and you want to talk about not empowering your team? The opposite of that. I'm sitting there ordering my food, and the manager walks by, the cashier that's taking my order, and is like, she says something to her that just wrecked her train of thought, and she had to stop taking my order to listen to her, because she was like, she wasn't barking an order out, she wasn't like yelling at her or anything, but like she might as well have been, because she just completely distracted her, and then she had to like stop and reset to be able to finish taking my order. And I'm like, no, you need like take the book, just take this and go read it and work through the questions in the chapters, and realize for yourself like that these little things that you're doing are not demeaning necessarily, but they're taking away from the experience, and ultimately might feel really demeaning to the person, to the point where they just don't want to be there anymore. And it's like, they might not have already wanted to be there forever. It's a job at Wendy's. It's not really designed for you to necessarily be there forever. But you're not helping the situation by taking them out of their thought process. And they're helping a customer, literally in front of a customer. Like, come on. Like, no.
A lot of people don't realize that people don't actually quit jobs. They quit their bosses. Because even I too, when I used to work in management consulting, there was one period where almost every week for 14 weeks, somebody was quitting my group. And I was like, wow, this is getting a lot. In fact, a lot of people had to come down and like, what's happening here? Because it was just like every single week somebody was giving notice. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't like they were all getting like great offers. Some people said they had an offer, but they just quit because they just got fed up and they wanted to go and just figure things out. And I realized that, a lot of the time is the way you treat people. Like, you could have a good manager, like, in as much as you're overworked, you're underpaid already, you can have a good manager that's the kind of person that's like, hey, I know you're overworked and you're underpaid, but let's just try and do the best we can, go home, get some rest. It's about how you make the person feel. People will go a lot farther when they know that you actually have empathy and you care about them, and you're willing to take the time just to understand their point of view than just, hey, we have all this work to do, just go crush it, give me back the stuff, and then it's not going to work. Especially these days where people have options. Really, people have a lot of options. So
no, definitely. And to say they quit the boss, like, my dad was my boss, and I quit. So, and it wasn't on the nicest of terms. It wasn't an easy decision, and it wasn't easy after I made that decision. And then still stuck around in a what became in my mind a toxic situation for myself, to the point like where it just was not good. Like, I was actively making it worse for not only myself but the people around me.
Yeah.
So I think I think that's absolutely true. That you quit your boss and that's it.
All right, so let's move on to the O, which is focus on the offer. And a lot of times in business, many businesses, whatever you're offering, you have a competitor that's offering the exact same thing. So how do you deal with being in a competitive environment where your competitors are pricing in one way and you have to price your product, and just because you don't want to lose business, you try to force yourself to price in lockstep with your competitors, as well as also, as much as that is happening, you can still put a little Joe magic on it and charge a premium price. So talk a little bit about pricing, positioning, and getting people into your offer. I was going to say funnel, but to your offer.
well, I would call it experience,
okay.
Right? And that's where it's a totally different thing. So, like, we could both offer the same thing, right? But the experience that we get could be totally different. And that's where your utilize process, right? That's where the process part comes in at the end to increase that offer. I always use like the example of like, okay, we both make guacamole, you and I, Chi, right? When we're competing, our guacamoles are both amazing. Like, you couldn't, like, blind taste test, like, you couldn't tell which one was better, right? They're different, but they're both incredible.
Yeah.
The difference is when you come to my store or my shop and you get my guacamole, it comes in like a big black cup, like a big condiment cup. Versus when they go to your place, they get the in the mortar, the pestle and mortar, right? So the difference there is I'm charging $9 for mine, you're charging $12 for yours. You're getting $3 more for an equal product, but the experience that I'm getting, the presentation that I'm getting is better. Yeah. And maybe I don't necessarily have to charge $12 for mine because maybe my rent's less, where I'm in a different part of the city, but I upgrade my presentation, all of a sudden I can make $1 or $2 more, $1 or $2 more, it doesn't sound right, $1 more or $2 more. by increasing the presentation of that product. Commodity, like, we, especially, believe me, in the trucking industry, we would compete on commodity products, and they would always be trying to make more commodity products by, like, okay, we used to have like 50 part numbers that fit these different trucks. Now we have 3. And one of them is like on 90% of them. The other 2 are like kind of the fringe ones. Great. So now everyone's like discounting the heck out of the 90% one that fits most of the trucks. And at that point, you're looking at like, okay, what's the buying process for the customer? Is it, can I increase that process or increase that experience for the customer without adding a lot to it? Maybe by fixing the process that for them to buy from me might add a little bit of cost to do so, but I'm going to be able to get that much more because now, okay, I could save $1 by going to Chi, but Joe has this really cool process where I just like, boom, like however they do their magic, when I call up the team is more willing to help me. They're not putting me on hold as much. I get a person. I don't have to sit through the dial pad thing. Those little things could be like, oh, great. So, okay, I paid $1 more per part, but I actually get the part on time. I got friendly people to work with. All these like little things can make such a big difference where it's like, yeah, it's $1 more. Yeah. But you're actually going to get it. And the first time they go to you and be like, oh, I'm going to save $1 or $2, and to show up, and we had this happen a lot. People would advertise the popular brand, and then show up with like the overnight like Chinese, Fugazi brand, right? Yeah. And it's like, you can't. Yeah, you're gonna get away with it for a little while, but after a while, if it doesn't hold up, you're gonna be out the door, right? Yeah. So unless you're the only game in town,
which is very rare in a lot of businesses.
It absolutely is. So increasing that offer doesn't necessarily mean like you got to be like, oh, I'm going to give the kitchen sink away on top of every time you buy something, or even just like, look, one of the things that like my dad pioneered in our industry, because the trucking industry moves very slow, is because my dad was like awesome a salesman. He was like, I'm going to spend the extra money to print color advertisements. And like sales flyers, right? Because all of our competitors are just black and white photocopy. They look like crap. It's terrible. You put the color on there, and it's like you see a desk with like full of like sales advertisements and things. Like ours stands out right away. That type of thing. Like going in the opposite direction. And yeah, it was a lot more expensive, but we also made a lot more money from doing these little types of things that just add to the offer, add to the experience, making sure your lights, if you have lights in a building, are all the lights on? Does your sign look like crap out front? Is there weeds growing out? Those types of things. Like people want to feel like they're getting a great experience and being taken care of in more ways than they even know that they want to be, right? So it's up to you to just be like, okay, now with that said, like make sure Rome's not burning while you're trying to like go pull weeds out of the front, out of the front of the property or whatever. But you can apply these to service base. It doesn't matter if it's service or if it's, because really it all comes back to service. Like that's really, and going back to the fact that it's all about building relationships and building a better relationship this is exactly how you go about doing that.
Yeah, and nobody does it better than your good friends at Disney, who build relationships with people from childhood to adulthood to grandparenthood, by basically doing cartoons, leveraging that into merchandising, leveraging that into movies, into music, into coming over to the theme park, into so many things. And it's just like everywhere you look when you get into the Disney ecosystem, there's value. But at the same time, there's give me your money.
Well, it's called synergy. That was the term coined by Michael Eisner. Or Eisner. Yeah. Eisner. Anyway, yeah. So it's funny you mentioned Disney, because like you're just softballing it for me that Lee Cockrell, former executive vice president to Walt Disney World, wrote the foreword. He honored me by blessing the book with his foreword, and I was able, when I met him in person a few years back, I was able to give him a copy of my book and thank him for making my childhood a little bit more magical, because he was working there during the time in which I was going there as a kid growing up. So he was an operations guy, he's a process guy, he's an experienced customer service guy. And he's talking all over the world, and I'm just super honored that he would choose to bless the book like that. So it's so fitting that somebody from the Disney company would do that for me, because of how much I love Disney.
Yeah. And so as we start to wind down, let me ask you one or two wrapping up questions. I think we've talked about the process, but just to tie it together, how would you create like a good business system or process to get things more efficient, so that a business owner, an entrepreneur, can start reducing cost and also be more efficient in leveraging whatever they're doing to generate profits?
So it starts by writing things down, right? Like that's the number one thing, is like going through the process of what you actually do. So then you can be like, oh wow, look at how much time I'm wasting. In the book I write about how, and I know everybody hates it, and I don't blame them for hating it. But like, hey, I'm every year I want you to write down all the stuff that you do, and as from a team perspective. So then you can start to be like, okay, great. So maybe we don't need, Bill and accounting to be going to like Sam's Club every week to go buy supplies. Like we could either order them online, because Amazon is a thing, or we could we could pull a couple of the other tasks that other people are doing that are outside the office, and we get somebody to do it, a part-time person to do it. So now I'm not paying, $80,000 a year to have someone leave for 3 hours a week to go do errands. I'm paying, $25,000 to have one person go do all these things and answer the phones and do a whole bunch of other things, and maybe even coming up with things that's like, man, it would be great if somebody did that. Yeah. But like, no one's gonna go do that because no one wants to do that. Like the reasons somebody wants to go to Sam's Club, well, you get to leave for for 3 hours and go buy stuff. Like, of course they want to go do that. Don't want to do other things around the place. So finding out who's doing what, and then being able to hold them accountable to it, holding yourself accountable to it, and just figuring out like, hey, like if my job is X, but X really incorporates like a whole bunch of things that shouldn't incorporate, we can find that out. We can get somebody else. We could spend less money on it, or we could just cut it out and just stop doing that thing that we're doing. It doesn't have to be a blame game, right? And that's really where like taking that ego away from from yourself to be able to stop and say, okay, like why are we doing this? What's the benefit for it? Just like I had in my own business, had to stop and think like, okay, I'm doing these podcasts, I'm interviewing all these people, but what is it really doing for my business? Is it helping me get clients? Is it helping me demonstrate how awesome I am at business? Not really. So, it is, but just over a much longer period of time where I got to get people to listen for hours and hours and hours and hours to understand that, like, oh, Joe actually knows what he's talking about. Like, damn, like, how did that happen? So, going through and building out, I dropped my pen. Going through and just writing down those things, that it starts with that. And then, start attaching cost to those things, right? So you can start to figure out like, okay, well, how much does this really cost? Because that's the thing, like everyone's like, Joe, I don't understand your cover. Like, why does it say sales? What if you get sales? Like you don't have a business if you don't have sales, right? Yeah. But at the most basic part of it is like, okay, if you buy something for $5 and you're selling it for $8 and you're like, great, I made $3. But what if you didn't actually make $3? What if you lost $2 on everything you sold, and now we're selling millions of them, and we're losing money left and right, and we don't even necessarily realize it because we don't have our processes in place to know our numbers, because it also talks a lot about knowing your numbers, and it talks about creating new numbers so that you can figure out how to, what metrics can you hold yourself accountable to, the business accountable to, your team accountable to, and and using the process to empower your team, going back to the team part, because making them not only feel like they're part of the process, but allowing them to be part of the process and building out that process will go a long way in making people feel empowered and invested in your business. And I think that was the key, going back to like when I was doing the inventory thing, and I had a handful of people that were like really in tune and like did way more than I would ever ask anybody to do. Sometimes they were doing it without me even asking them to do it. They felt invested because they felt valuable. They felt part of the process. They felt like they were a part of a chain. They were part of something. And that's why you have people working at Disney for like a little bit more than minimum wage, but they love it because they feel like they're a part of that magic. And you can create that magic. You should create that magic. It doesn't have to be some far off, thing. And real quick with your business, I think that everybody should be working towards a model where they're building their business for their lifestyle, not their lifestyle for their business. Because it happens so quick that you don't even necessarily realize it. I mean, growing up, my grandfather was sitting at the kitchen table on Sundays doing paperwork and stuff. I mean, this was back in like the early 90s, but you can let that stuff can creep in, and there's a time and place for it, right? You have to know when the chips are down, you got to swing the bat. But once you're past a certain point, you need, obviously you need sales. It's part of the lifeblood of the business. But you got to be able to look past that and to get to that, to be able to take things to the next level. You got to look past just how many sales can I get.
And that's the only way to grow your business, actually. Man, Joe, if people aren't convinced that you're an expert and you know what you're talking about before this, I think this podcast is going to make it beyond obvious that you actually know what you're talking about. So, for the guys listening to the podcast, give us some final words of wisdom in terms of, hey, I always place this scenario to every guest that I have. There's somebody sitting on the fence listening to this podcast. They're consuming entrepreneurial content, but they're dissatisfied with their job. They're thinking of starting something, or they've started something and it's not getting the traction they want. They're not making as much money, or they're not even making any money because they're still struggling. And of course, every entrepreneur struggles for many months, even many years, up until one thing just clicks like that. So what's your advice to that person still in the trenches, still struggling, still trying their best to make it and become successful and help their friends and their family out?
Well, first off, they could give me a call. My phone's always on.
Yeah.
And second off, but really, realistically, what they really need to do is they need to figure out, like, are they doing what they really, really want to be doing, right? Like, I was having a great conversation today with one of my interns, and he is going to be starting his own, he's been doing, he's had his own business, but he's like really going to be starting to take it a lot more seriously now.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was like kind of torn, because he's like, well, with this internship ending, I don't know if I should be, going and get corporate clients versus, like, because he's super artistic, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, he could go and get, to get artistic jobs, and he does really amazing design. So I'm like, well, look, why don't you go through I'm always about percentages. So, like, figure out the percentage, but for me, like, I really see him doing the creative thing long term, right? Like, I don't think he's going to be real happy doing the biz, like getting business and clients and all that stuff, versus, like, I created these awesome t-shirts and get them out there, and we sell a whole bunch of them because people really love the designs. And I told him, one of the things I told him was, like, look, it's something you can't teach people is creating something that people actually want, right? Regardless of if you're there to tell them how awesome it is. Like, that's why you come up with triggering titles like "Sales Won't Save Your Business," so that people are like, "Whoa, I gotta check that out," right? Figuring out, how you can make it doing the things that you want is going to go a heck of a lot longer and a lot less burnout than if you're doing stuff that you're like, yeah, I don't really like I do websites, right? I've been building websites since 96 to make ends meet during the beginning process of me leaving my family's business. I built websites for people. I really don't, it's not like my favorite thing in the world to do, but I can do it. I work with those people. We create great, a great experience together. But, it's not where my heart really is. My heart is in talking about business. If you haven't gotten one thing out of this, I'm very passionate about business, and could talk about it all day, every day, always. Like, I'm always down for talking about it, because it's just, I don't know why. I can't explain it.
Yeah, no, I love that. We've been on the show for almost an hour and a half. And I feel like we could go on talking forever, because I too am just like you when it comes to business. I told my friends that when I left the States to come back, the only thing that really pained me was I had lived 12 years in the United States. All through that time, the only thing I invested in was books. So I had 500 books in my house, in my flat in New Jersey.
Wow.
And so I couldn't ship all those books. It was going to be super expensive. It was going to cost at least $10,000. So I said I'll pick like the top 50 or the top 60 I can take in a suitcase. And then the rest, I just put it in storage in my church in New Jersey, because I know the only person that reads is my pastor and me. So I know whenever I go back to Jersey, I'll still see like a good chunk of my books. But that's the passion, when you have that passion in you, you'll always want to let it show, which you clearly do with everything you do in business, writing books, speaking, running the conference. Everything you do, the passion comes out there. So Joe, tell us a little bit about where people can find you, where they can get the book. I know it's launching tomorrow, so you know what, we're not even going to edit this. I'll just try and clip it and push it up on the website tomorrow, and also on YouTube and whatnot. So tell us where people can connect with you, connect with everything that you do in terms of the business podcast, connect with you on social media, and of course where to get the book.
So you can get everything at superjoepardo.com. You can get my social media there. It's all at superjoepardo. So facebook.com/superjoe, Instagram, Twitter. And connect with me on LinkedIn too. superjoe.com/LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure works. You can get the book at saleswon't.com. It'll take you right to the Amazon order page. I do have a landing page for it, but right now I'm just trying to drive every single person to that Amazon link for now. Like if you go to my website and click on like the book, that like on the front page it takes you there. But yeah, so go to saleswon't.com. You can get your copy. It's $14.95. It's $3.99 for the digital copy. And the audiobook is coming out in like a week or so. I'm actually making my audiobook debut in that. So in the book it says Super Joe Says, and I actually read the Super Joe Says parts.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah, I was told that no one's ever done that from according to my narrator.
I think very few people actually, guest speak in their own audiobook.
Yeah, well, hey, I try to do things differently, and even with the book itself, like my editor was like, he wrote a lot of notes where he's like, I've never read this before. Like I've edited hundreds of like self-help books and business books, and I've never read the stuff that you're saying before. And I was like, well, it's probably because I don't read a lot of books, so I'm not reading and then rehashing that stuff. And I think that from a creative process, it's really difficult to not like copy things, right? Or to like assimilate those types of things right in, especially when you're trying to be in the same niche in the same world as those other things. So for me, like I'm a slow reader, so that's why I don't read books. But but at the same time, like I just try to limit that creativity like input so that I can create these things that's like, wow, no one's ever seen that before. And I always Google it too. Whenever I have a great idea, I Google it and then see if someone else came up with it. If they didn't, then I'm like, oh, I'll put my stake in the ground.
Yeah. Cool, man. Cool. I'll link everything to the show notes once the episode gets published tomorrow. So, my friend, it's really been a pleasure coming. Man, we've talked for almost an hour and a half, and we could still go on.
I could definitely do another hour. I'm good, man. I love this stuff.
This has been so much fun, man. I really thank you seriously from the bottom of my heart for coming to do the show. It's been
thank you for having me. No, thank you for having me, and I definitely want to have you on my show. We'll I can send you over the link to do the submission, and we'll get you on there. All right.
All right, no problem. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate that.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the show today. If you love what you hear on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast at www.odogwu.com.